ready, then I'll get started. Okay, so just a little bit of an introduction about myself. I know you've just listened to an introduction about me, but I'll just say a few things about some of my roles and some of the things that I do. My primary role these days is as Director of Peachey Publications. That's an independent digital publishing company, and we make digital books and learning materials for virtual classrooms and for interactive whiteboards and real classrooms as well. Okay, so that's one of my roles. Then my second role is as course designer. I design lots of online courses and work with different companies producing online learning and e-learning courses. Most recently, I've been, something's happening with my screens. Okay, let's see if I can get back to my screen. Okay, one of my other roles is as a course designer. I design online courses, digital online courses, and among the things people I've worked with recently is Eton, developing soft skills courses for them, working with various companies developing language learning courses, and recently working with the British Council to develop courses on interfaith dialogue. So those are some of the things I do as a course designer. I'm also an author and write books about e-learning and write learning materials too. And I'm also an educational technology consultant, so I help companies understand what kind of technology they need to provide education. As you can see from the slides, I'm also a two-time Innovations Awards winner. I won the British Council's Innovations Award in 2012 for designing an online course for Bell Educational Services. That was a course on blended learning. And I also won an Innovations Award in 2016 for the first of my books, which was Digital Video, a manual for language teachers. And that was the beginning of Peachey Publications, if you like. So that's just a bit of background about me. If you want a copy of this presentation at the end of the session, I'll be sharing a link with you to it, so don't worry too much if you're trying to take notes or anything like that. I'll give you a link to a presentation, and I'll also give you a link to an article that the presentation is built on, so that will include most of the notes that you'd need to take. So you can sit tight, try and be comfortable, try and interact a little through the chat, and try to enjoy the session. Okay. Oh, as you may know, I'm also giving away a free book at the end of the session. So if you can stay till the end, I'll give you a link to a free book and a code that you can use to download it with. Okay. Okay, I'm going to change slides. Can you type in a yes when you see the slide open for you? Hopefully it won't be too long. Yeah, okay. So I thought we'd start with a little bit of interaction. I've told you who I am, so it'd be nice if you could tell me a little bit about who you are. So if you have a QR code scanner on your phone, you can quickly scan the QR code that's up there in the top right hand corner. If not, you can follow the link that's here, and I'll try and get a link to that for you as well. Let's see if I can. Okay, so people are doing it as well, just so that I'd like to find out a little bit about who you are and what you do. So if you can type in a couple of words or a job title to say what you do through the code, that would be great. So far we've got an activist, teacher of English, interpreter, teacher. Okay. So do try and type something in there. If you're struggling with the QR code, you can just type it into chat. But it'd be good to have some idea of, what you want to do with your presentations and your presentation skills. It's probably quite different between being a teacher or a lecturer or somebody who's in business. Just give you a few minutes to type in there. That's good. Great. Good. Okay. Networks interpreter. Okay. EFL teacher. Yes, some more words starting to appear there. This is a little tool that I use that's from Mentimeter, and it's great to use it to get some interaction going, and so people can see who's, and to capture who's in the room with you. It's good to know who your audience is, because, as you know, probably if you've done a presentation like this before, you can't actually see anyone. You're just sort of talking to your computer screen. So it's kind of nice to know, what people are, that people are here and what they're doing. Okay, so I'll get started. So the theme of this presentation, I've called it the 4 Ps of giving a successful webinar. And basically those 4 Ps are about place, choosing a suitable place to deliver your webinar or presentation, the platform you use and understanding how to use that platform, the kind of preparation you need and things you need to do to get ready for that, and then a few tips for actually delivering your presentation in an engaging way and sort of trying to make it interesting for people, because of course you never know whether anyone's there, and so if you keep engaging with them, then that's a way of keeping people awake and making sure they're responsive and they're still following you. Okay, so I'll start with the easy ones and work my way towards the more difficult ones. So of the easiest ones, I think, is place. Although perhaps, for you that's not easy. It depends a little bit on where you're giving your presentation from. Are all of you in lockdown at the moment? In that you're not allowed to leave your house or your home? Could you answer your yes or no if you're in lockdown at the moment? We're in lockdown here at the UK, so nobody's allowed to leave. So, you have to, if you're working from home, you have to find somewhere to do this. Great, good. So, I mean, the first things about place are some of the important things about the place you choose to give your webinar from. You really need somewhere that's quiet. There's nothing worse than trying to listen to someone who's giving a presentation or a webinar or a sales pitch, from a room where there's lots of noise in the background. You can hear lots of other people speaking. You really need somewhere quiet where you're not going to be disturbed, and of course private. I'm sure we've all seen the BBC TV clip of the man who was being interviewed and his 2 children walked in from behind him. So I've got my door, I have a 5-year-old too, so I've got my door well locked there, and hopefully she won't be bursting in, but be prepared if she is. So you need somewhere quiet, somewhere private. You need good airflow as well, somewhere with some fresh air. You might find that you're starting to get a bit hot as you give your presentation, and somewhere cool as well. You don't want to be getting too hot or too flushed. The other thing, try to avoid distractions. Anything, if you're pointing your computer at a window and there are things going on outside the window, that's not such a good idea, and minimize the distractions for other people as well. You don't want lots of things happening in the background behind you while you're giving your presentation. You need people to be able to focus on you wherever you are. How many of you think that you have a suitable room to give your presentation in? Can you type in a yes or a no into the chat? Yeah, it can be very difficult if you don't have somewhere suitable, and you just have to make the best of what you've got. But there are a few things that you can do that will help you. I mean, one very important thing is the background. I always go for a plain background. As you can see, my background's white. You should make sure it looks professional. Don't have lots of things in the background like your washing hanging up or things like or people walking by in the background that are going to distract people. I know a lot of people like to have bookshelves in the background that makes them look more intelligent or authoritative. I'm not so keen on the bookshelves, because I think you know, sometimes when I've seen people doing things with bookshelves or pictures in the background, I start getting distracted by the pictures or the background. So, you know, for me, I don't think that's a very good option. I always go for something plain. The other thing that you need to do and need to remember is that, you know, you don't want to disappear into your background. I've got a dark jacket on and I've got a good light background behind me, so you know, I'm going to stand out. If you have a black background, you're wearing a black shirt, you become some kind of head that's floating around and hands, and that can be kind of a bit distracting and a bit amusing for people. But so try not to blend into your background. You need something that contrasts against it so that you stand out. Another thing I've been told is to avoid wearing stripes, because the camera can have sort of some strange effects if you're wearing stripes. So think about your background and consider what's behind you, so that it doesn't get too distracting. Something boring is fine, just boring white. Okay, I'll move on to the next thing. The other important thing is light. You know, probably more important than your background is sort of having good lighting, and that can be very difficult to work with if you're working from home. You know, if you're looking at my pictures now, the top left one is great. You know, if you've got professional lighting that you can have shining on you, then that's marvelous. You're going to be seen that much better. Wonderful. You know, that's great. If you're stuck with a silhouette behind you, if you're stuck with lighting behind you, you can very easily turn into a silhouette like the woman reading the book, and nobody really wants to watch a sort of black silhouette. The other thing to avoid is lighting that's too strong in front of you. You know, the direct light that's on your face creates reflections if you've got glasses, which can be really distracting, or you don't want to be squinting and dazzled when you're talking to people. So make sure it's not too strong. If you have a little lamp or a standard lamp like the desk lamp there, and you have it to one side and you've got a wall to the side of you, try and bounce the light off the wall so that it's not coming directly to you, it's bouncing off something that's on the wall. You can even put some tin foil on the wall so that it reflects the light onto your face, and that will give you a much softer lighting or much better lighting. So you can get good lighting even if you don't have a professional room to do your presentation in. Okay, I'll just ask you another quick question. How are you for lighting in the room where you have to do your presentations from? Have you played with the lighting? Have you experimented with it? If you do have a real problem with lighting and you're using a laptop, it's always worth picking up the laptop, looking at yourself and just moving around the room with the laptop in your hands like this and seeing how the light falls on your face. You know, basically the most important things is that there's light coming onto your face, it's not behind you, and that people can see you reasonably clearly. So it's worth trying that out. That's a quick tip. And at best, you know, better still, have some good lighting, you know, or have some natural light from a window. Natural light can be great, but if you live in a place like England, as I do, you know, you'll find that it's changing the whole time. So you could start off with bright sunshine that's far too bright and then end it being far too dark. So, you know, that one's difficult to balance. So what I have is a lamp to one side and an overhead light and a couple of little lights just to throw some soft light onto the face so people can see you. One of the other things that, you know, I think you should be very careful about, especially if you're doing joint presentations with someone else, is that you don't share computers. Always use one computer, one webcam, one microphone. There's nothing worse than trying to listen to two people who are moving a laptop between them to try and do a presentation. You know, it's a disaster for the person listening. That you've got faces peeking in from one side. The voice, you can hear one voice and not another. So if you're doing a meeting like this, if you're doing a presentation, if you're doing a webinar, make sure that it's just you with the computer. If you're doing it with a partner, put them in another room on another computer and do it together that way. Don't have them in the same room with you on a different computer, because you'll be hearing each other and picking up echo. So those are some of the basics of place. The next thing is platform, the platform that you use, and understanding the platform. And this is, I guess, quite simple in some ways. In some ways, you might not have a choice. You know, your company or your school may just tell you have to use Zoom, but there are lots of others available, and a lot of ones that are free. And making sure that you have the right platform for the kind of presentation or the kind of meeting that you want to do is quite important. Do any of you use a specific platform? Can you type in what platform you're using if you're forced to use one? Is it most people are on Zoom, Google Meet, Zoom? Teams. Yeah, there are lots of different ones, and some platforms are better for webinars than they are for meetings. For example, Adobe Connect was made for delivering webinars. It's great for having one person at the front in your presentation and sharing that way, but it's not so good for meetings, or if you want to have interaction or you want to get the other people talking. Zoom is quite good for that, and Zoom's very good on showing the actual video of the person. So if you really want to sort of connect with the people, and you're having a smaller meeting or a smaller pitch where you want to actually be able to speak to people, then Zoom is very good for that. You know, but be sure you try different platforms and choose one that's appropriate for you. I mean, the other thing to do is always check the settings and make sure you understand what's the settings can do. You know, every platform, will have some advanced settings. Just because they say they're advanced don't be intimidated by them. Have a look at them, find out what they can do, and find out how they can help you. Make sure you know how to find the chat. Make sure you know how to mute your voice, mute your video, or mute the people who are listening to you or watching you. There's nothing worse than having someone joining a webinar or a presentation halfway through, their microphone's on, they start talking, they don't really know what's happening. It can be really disruptive for you. So know what you can do with your platform, what the settings can do, how the screen sharing works. The best thing to do is try it out with a colleague first. Get somebody in a different room just to log in and actually run through your presentation and try it with them as an audience first and get some free feedback from them. One of the other things it's good to know how to do is how to troubleshoot. Often people arrive in meetings, or they arrive for a presentation or webinar, and they don't really know how to set up their sound or how to do various things. If you do have time and you can help them, especially if it's a client that you're giving a presentation to, know about the platform, know enough about the settings to help them with them and help them get onto the meeting and listen to you effectively. I'll just stop for some water. Just out of curiosity, you can type this into the chat or not, but have you ever done a webinar that was a disaster, or had a meeting that was a disaster? I mean, I know I have. Can you type in a yes or a no into the chat? I know that I have, and for various reasons. Could be connectivity, it could be just that you weren't that prepared, or the platform behaved in a different way, or the other person couldn't get connected. But every now and again things are going to go wrong. That's just one of the facts of life, but you can do your best to avoid it. Yeah, the ultimate one is the no internet connection. But even that, you can get around nowadays. I usually have my phone as backup, so that I can link my computer to the 4G on my phone and still get a connection. The other thing is, the preparation of your slide deck and making sure that you have your slide deck prepared, and making sure that the format that you use is compatible with the platform that you're using. It sounds basic, but you know, a lot of people have PowerPoint. They put loads of dynamic movement into it, and then when they go online, you know, they onto the platform, they find that it doesn't accept PowerPoint, or that all their animation has gone. You know, check out and make sure that you know you have the right type of slide deck to deliver within the platform that you're using. Make sure your font size is big enough, it's readable, you know, have a backup as PDF. You know, PDF is one of the kind of fail safes. I'm actually using an HTML5 presenter at the moment, so my presentation is actually online, and for me I think that saves a lot of connectivity. So if I'm worried about sort of low connectivity, having that online so that it's streaming and it's not having to upload from my computer can really help a bit. And the other thing is that the presentation I'm using, because it runs in the browser, I can pass it to anyone and they can view it, so that you know they don't need special software, you know, and things like that. They can just view it in whatever browser they want. Okay, so those are just some of the basic things. I'll actually share a link to you with you at the end to my presentation, so you'll be able to see how that works. It's using a technology called Genially, which is a web-based presentation creator. Okay, so let's get on to preparation. So yeah, check how we're doing for time. Okay, so the preparation part, the sound is very important, very, very important, much more important than the video aspect of it. You need people to be able to hear you. They need to be able to hear you clearly. If you can, always use a headset with earphones and a microphone. You might not notice it yourself, but if you're using speakers rather than the headset, it can be creating echo for the people who are listening to you, because your microphone picks up what the speakers are putting out, and other people can hear echo. You might not hear it, but for other people it can be really bad, and it can be really distracting and make you almost impossible to listen to. So use a headset, always, always, always. If possible, with a microphone on. Mine have a little microphone on as well. That really helps. If, like me, you want to move about a bit, you know that your audio and your sound is going to stay constant. If you're using one that's attached to your computer, then when you move, you could turn your head to one side or another, then the sound changes, and it can make you much more difficult to listen to and to hear. Ones that are built into the computer, especially PCs, can also start picking up sound from the CPU and the fan on your computer. So, you know, if you've got one that works here on a headset, I'm just using standard headphones and a microphone that come with my phone, so you know that's good enough. Plug it into your computer. If you've got a USB one, it will probably work better and give you a better sound. But you know, take the time to get a headset, use it properly, and know how to adjust the volume on it as well. You need to be sure you can adjust the volume so that you can be heard well enough, and so that you can hear people well enough. So that's very important. How many of you are using speakers now rather than headphones? Can you type in speakers or headphones? Yeah, I mean, speakers are fine if you're only listening, but if you're the person giving the presentation and your microphone's on, you need to be wearing a headset. It can have a disastrous effect for everybody else. Okay, I'll move on. The webcam, after your sound, the webcam is very important. When you have your webcam, you try and get it at eye level, so that I've got my camera at just about the same level as my eyes. You know, this is really important for sort of making sure that you you have eye contact with the camera, and to making sure your body or your head isn't distorted. If you're looking up at it, you know, that's not a very great way to do a presentation. If you're looking down over it, that isn't very good either. You know, it's starting to intimidate people, and you're not going to sort of make the best impression. Try and have it at eye level and get a reasonable distance away from it. Yeah. If you're using a laptop, often what you find is with the laptop, the screen comes up like this and back, and you find it's distorting you. So if you can, get a laptop riser and have your screen so that it's flat, so that the webcam is the screen is parallel to your body, and you're looking directly at the webcam. That will help you to make eye contact and help you make you look proportional, so that you don't have a big head or a great big nose or something like that. I have the big ears anyway, but I just have to live with those. And this aspect of space and distance, you know, you'll notice that I'm actually quite far away from my webcam, and I like that because, you know, you can see my hands. If you're used to presenting in a real room, you know, maybe you use your hands quite a lot. It's good for people to be able to see your hands. So if you get that bit of distance, you know, people can see you properly. You can use some body language when you're presenting, and that helps, you know, communicate a little better if you can use a little bit of body language, and helps create a better impression. You know, if you're right up close to the computer, which is what most people do, especially with laptops, or if you're at an angle like that, you can see that it's kind of really distorting your head, or, you know, you're not very well framed, you can't use any body language. You know, you really want to have it parallel to you and be able to step back from it. Far enough for people to see your elbows and your hands, you can use them more. You'll notice that my microphone and headphone cords are a little bit short. I'd actually like to be a bit further back here, but I can't go any further back because it's going to rip it out of my ears, I think. But no, being able to get some distance from your webcam will make you look better. You know, you might have also noticed that I do my presentation standing up as well. You know, I've got a riser on top of my desk, so it lifts my computer up, and so that it's on eye level with me, and I'm standing up while I'm doing it. If you're doing a presentation standing up, you're able to move around a little bit. It's easier to use the body language, and for me, it keeps me a little bit more alert and a little bit more comfortable as well. So, you know, I'd recommend doing presentations standing up if you can, especially if you're used to doing public speaking and you're used to using your body and your hands a lot. Then, you know, standing up and doing it is much more natural, I think. Have any of you tried doing one standing up before? Maybe you can type in a yes or a no, depending on whether you've tried standing up. Yeah, it's worth trying. You know, I feel it sort of helps you keep alert and a bit more natural, and you can use the hands a bit more as well, which is nice. Okay, just a quick question. Another one of these little QR codes, if you want to scan them, and we can create a word cloud. How do you feel before giving a presentation? How do you feel before you're giving a presentation? I've actually put my word in there. I actually get quite nervous about doing these kinds of things. You can either use the QR code to add your word or any words related to how you feel about presentations, or you can type something into the chat if you want to. And while you're doing that, I'll have a quick sip of water. Yeah, a lot of people get quite nervous about doing them, and I do the same. And I think, you know, there are a few ways that you can deal with that. You know, make sure you're well prepared always helps. For me, the standing up helps as well. I feel less nervous when I'm standing up. It's easier to move my hands and things like that. And you know, and always, you know, taking a bit of time just before you start to go through your presentation and, you know, find your calm space. You know, a little bit of meditation or something like that can help. But it can be quite nerve-wracking. One of the things to remember, though, is that, you know, it's harder to see the nerves than you think, especially because this is just a very small screen that you're seeing people with. The nervousness is more likely to come through your voice. So, you know, always remember to breathe and take a good breath. Don't feel that you have to rush. I have a tendency to go a bit too fast because I plan too much most of the time. But again, as I said, standing up will help with that. Always have some water nearby. Again, I never have enough of it. I've almost run out and I've still got some more of my presentation to do. Look after your voice. I also have throat lozenges, which I suck just before I start so that I don't dry up too much. And sometimes I have another one during the presentation if it's quite long. So sort of be prepared, you know, to look after your voice during the presentation. No, it's quite easy if you're talking for quite a while for your voice to start to dry up. And again, especially if you're nervous. I know there are people who do voice warm-ups and do all kinds of sounds like this kind of fast breathing and rapid breathing, and I think that probably works very well. You know, so if you do have a problem with the voice and your voice tends to get nervous, just go to YouTube and Google a few voice warm-up exercises, and they might well help you. I did a presentation in Edinburgh with somebody who had a very good voice. He was a regular radio presenter, and he spent about 20 minutes warming his voice up and making all sorts of vowel sounds and things like that before he started. And it was definitely effective. It's something that I find hard to do, but, you know, if it works for you, you know, prepare your voice, have water, have lozenges. Okay, and so now we'll get on to the actual presentation itself. Eye contact is very important when you're trying to do these. Eye contact is quite difficult because whenever you're doing a presentation like this, the tendency is to look down at the screen, which is what I'm doing now. I'm trying to look over at the chat. I'm trying to read my presentation slides. But what you need to do is try to look at the camera. If you're looking at the camera, you're more likely to make better eye contact. One of the things that I've done here now is that if you've used Zoom, you'll probably know that Zoom has you can see yourself in the video window. The best thing to do is to move that video window up to the top of your screen. You can drag it around and move it. If you put it up to the screen underneath your webcam, then when you're looking at yourself and seeing how, you know, what your body language is like and things like that, you'll be making eye contact with the people who are listening to you, or you hope are listening to you. So be sure to try and keep looking at the web camera rather than looking down at your slides, and speak to the camera. One of the worst things you can do, I think, if you're doing one of these, is to be reading your presentation. You know, if you've got it on a piece of paper or your notes and you're looking down like this, you know, all the people are seeing is the top of your head while you're reading, or even worse, if you've got it at the wrong angle, they're looking up your nose while you're reading. You know, so try to avoid reading your presentation or your text. You know, have it well enough prepared so that you can remember what you want to say. Just have some bullet points. If you really struggle with that, you can get something called a cue prompter, which you can put above the webcam on your computer, and that will stream the points, or if you have to work from the script, will stream your script so that you can read it and still make eye contact at the same time. But, you know, for me, there's nothing worse than, you know, watching for 45 minutes while somebody's reading, you know, with their head down and you're just looking at the top of their head. You know, if if the worst comes to the worst and you feel that you do have to read it and that's what you have to do, it's better to turn your camera off and just have the presentation, because, you know, that's not something that gives a good impression. How many of you, when you give your presentations, you work from notes or you work from a script? Can you type in either notes, script, or improvise? Just type that into the chat. Let's see what you do. Yeah. Good, great. I mean, what I do is, you know, I have my main bullet points on the slide, so they're there to remind me, and the rest I'm just improvising and sort of making up as I go along, really. I kind of feel like if you really know your topic and you know your subject, you can do that, and you can sort of make it up, as long as you've got, you know what the key bullet points are there on your slides, and you've got a structure there. Your slides give you some structure. I've always been terrified of trying to memorize or read scripts, so I find it actually easier to improvise it than to go through it reading. One of the next things to think about is to try to speak naturally. If you're used to doing presentations in large conference halls, and you're a teacher who's used to trying to have to speak over 30 students, you might find that you project your voice quite a lot. For a webinar or something like this, that can be very grating for the person who's listening. You know, you have to get used to trying to speak and do your presentation like you're speaking to someone who's next to you. You know, if you start projecting your voice, it's going to come over as very false and very loud. So you need to think about how you use your voice. Try to speak naturally. You don't need to be too loud. Use the volume controls on the computer to give you the volume, and just speak like you're talking to someone who's right next to you. You know, don't try and hit the back of the room. One of the other strange things about these kind of webinars, especially if you're used to presenting in a conference hall like the one that's showing in the slide, is that, you know, when I do a presentation at a conference, I can see people, I can see their faces, I can tell whether they understand or whether they're following what I'm saying. I can tell whether I'm going too fast or too slow, or whether they're falling asleep and I need to wake them up a bit. But with something like this, you can't actually see anyone, and I can't hear anyone. You know, I have no idea whether any of you are still at your computer. I can't hear what you're saying. I'm getting no feedback from your body language or your faces or something like that. And that can be very distracting and very off-putting when you first start doing things like this. And that's just one of those things that you really have to get used to. And what I find helps is actually using the chat. Keep asking questions, make sure people are there, make sure they're engaged. You know, as long as you're getting some response from the chat, then probably somebody's still there listening. And you know, so keep asking questions. So I'm just going to ask you a question quickly now. Are you still there? Can you type in a yes or a no, depending on whether you're still there? Great. I mean, nobody actually types in no, because if you're not there, you don't type anything in. But it's also always good to see those yeses and know that, you know, people are still engaged. And of course, you know, actually asking questions keeps people engaged as well. You know, they get to see what other people are saying, and as well as so they don't get that sort of sense of loneliness and isolation as well. But it can be quite, you know, I found it really strange at first when I first started doing this, that you just get no feedback, you hear nothing, you see nobody, and, you know, you don't really know whether you're just talking to your computer and nobody's there. Okay, the downside of that is the distractions. You know, if you're on your computer, and often, you know, if you're giving a very big presentation or a big webinar presentation where you have over 100 people, you'll find that the chat is moving all the time. So it can become a distraction. You know, if people are posting questions in there, posting comments, you find that some people start up conversations on the chat stream. You have to kind of learn to ignore those questions and try and just sort of focus on your presentation, because they can become very distracting. The other important thing, of course, is, you know, make sure there aren't other distractions coming from your computer. If you get notifications from Facebook or emails or things like that, you know, close all of those programs down before you start, so that you don't get something coming in and distracting you. Make sure you put your phone onto mute as well, because, you know, getting a call or in the middle of a presentation can be really distracting and can make you lose your train of thought. So, you know, turn everything off that might distract you. The other thing is, if you've got Facebook or email going in the background in your computer, that's going to be using up your connectivity and your CPU speed. So it could degrade the quality of your presentation in your voice and video as well. So make sure those other things are off, and you get the best possible connectivity, and you avoid those kinds of distractions. One of the other things to check and be aware of is lag. You know, sometimes there's voice lag, and your lips are moving at a different speed to the sound, or when you change your slides, there can be lag with the slides. So, you know, it's a good idea to check with people that they're actually looking at the same slide that you are to begin with. You know, either do this before you start, do it with someone, and check to see how much lag there is between when you change your slides and when the audience sees them. Because if there's a long delay, that can be quite confusing for anyone who's watching. So check, have a pause between slides, give it time to change on the screen of the person who's watching as well. Screen sharing is usually either quite quick or it doesn't work at all. If you're working in other different platforms where you're not screen sharing and where there's a presentation space, the lag can be a bit longer because the slide's having to upload. Again, that's one of the reasons why we use this browser-based HTML software instead of using PowerPoint, because it tends to reduce the amount of lag. But don't rush, give people time to see your slides change. And that's about all. That's about all in terms of tips. I can share my presentation with you, and also share the link to the free book if you like. And there's a link to an article that this talk is based upon. Okay, I'm just going to share the link to the article. This is from a blog post that I wrote called The 4 Ps of Presentation. Okay, and I'll also, let's just drag this down a bit, go back there. I'll see if I can share a link to the free book. I'll just type in a link to the free book. This is the book, Digital Tools for Teachers, and to download it for free, you need the code that's here. There's a little code there, R98, I'll type it in, R98 UIQGL6. So if you go to that address for the book and you use that code, click on buy now, and it will reduce the price to free. So you'll be able to download it for free. And I'll also share with you now the link to the presentation. So this is the link to the live presentation that I'm using now. So if you want to work through that and have a look at it later, by all means do. And you can try it out yourself if you want to use it for a demo. Okay, so that's everything from me in terms of tips. I hope that you've picked up something useful or something new from this. And if you have any questions, please do type them in and I'll do my best to try and answer them.
Thank you, Nicholas. It was really wonderful to have session from people like you. Yeah, it was a great learning experience. I would you like to have questions from the participants. I would really appreciate if questions can be typed in the chat box, and then we'll be able to get your question answers to Mr. Nicholas. So if you could type in your questions in the chat box, it would be highly appreciated. So do we have any question from anyone?
There's a question about the background.
Yeah.
When I was talking about the background, I was talking about the background that's behind me, which is my wall, which should be plain. In terms of your presentation itself, I think you should have your presentation should be colorful, dynamic, and as interactive as possible. But, you know, don't put too much text on it. Use images, use bullet points, but don't fill it full of text. That's you don't want people to have to read a lot from the screen while you're doing your presentation. But behind you, try and keep the background plain so that you don't disappear into it.
Yeah. So another question: when you stand up, when you type as you are, yeah.
Yeah, I've got a standing desk. So what happens with me is that, you know, when my desk lifts up, it lifts the computer and it lifts my keyboard as well. I'll see if I can tilt my screen well enough for you to. I don't think I can. Doesn't tilt well enough for you to see it. But basically, my screen, my computer keyboard is just below here, so I can still type. I've got my hands on the mouse and the keyboard now. And so I just have to move a bit slightly forward when I need to type, but I'm standing up the whole time. And for me, that works much better than sitting down, and where you tend to get tired and you tend to slouch a bit more.
So there are a few more questions. How can we cover up a distraction from chats?
The easiest way to cope with the distraction from the chat is just to close it. You know, here on Zoom, you can drag it around quite a lot as well. You drag it to a corner where it won't distract you, or close it when you're not using it and just open it again when you need to use it. It depends a lot on the platform that you're using, though. It's easier to do on some platforms than others, but Zoom is quite an easy one. I've got it to that side of my screen. I can put it down to the lower edge so that it's down in the corner, and then it's not catching my eye all the time.
And the question is, what should be the best length of the presentation in order to keep the audience engaged?
In terms of length, I think 45 minutes to an hour is probably about the top. If it's a presentation like this where people are just listening, you know, if it goes on for much longer than that, I think people sort of lose their attention span goes. And, you know, it's actually quite, it can be quite tiring listening to someone while you're sitting at a computer with headphones on. So, you know, I think try and keep it to around 45 minutes to an hour tops.
Wait, now another question: should it be the presenter's face on the screen plus presentation, or just the slide is enough?
I think you know, if you can show yourself as well as your presentation, that really helps. You know, it helps it to make it more engaging and more human. If people can see you, you can use as I'm doing now, the body language and sort of, you know, to communicate a bit better. And, you know, you might want to actually show people things, you know, during your presentation. It always helps to show people the odd thing, or whether it's a book or a picture or a slide. You know, use the camera to engage them as well. So, you know, by all means, you know, you really feel much more of a presence of a person if they can see you.
Another question: which is the best way to engage the audience actively? Because through the webinar, we didn't get feedback through our body language.
In terms of engaging people with the webinar. Keep them engaged through the chat is quite good. If you set up polls, or I used a little tool called Mentimeter, which I created the interaction with in mine. Those kinds of things will help. I'll just grab the link to Mentimeter and show you that. So the little word count things I used a free tool called Mentimeter to create those, and so you can drop those kinds of things into your presentation to engage people. You can have interactive questions. People like to do polls if they can see what other people think as well. So polls can be where you show the results during the presentation, can be quite engaging as well. So the last question we'll be having is that which presentation tools do you think is going to be best, which, as per your suggestion? Oh, I'm using something called Genially. I'll type it into. I use something called Genially, which I've just typed into the bottom there, and that's for me, that's a very good tool, because you can create these dynamic presentations very quickly. They have some nice templates. It's free to use. You can also sort of add things like videos to it and audio and links out to everything. So, yeah. I saw there's a question about lighting. Yes. The front lighting does cause headaches, but you know that's the best thing to do is bounce it off a wall at the side. Don't have it right on you at your eyes. I've got a bit of a softer light that's a bit behind my computer that you can't see, but you know, bounce it from the side. Have a bright light that bounces off a wall that's to the side of you, reflects onto your face and lights you from the side. That's much better, and it doesn't give you a headache or create reflections on the glasses and things like that. Sir, have you tapped in the chat the tool which you're talking about, genuinely, because it's not being reflected? Yeah, it's underneath Mentimeter in my last. Okay. My last one. You can also find it if you look. I'll just give you a direct link to it. My thing's not going to everyone. That's why. I'll just share it again. There it is, Genially. Yeah. Sorry, I was just type in another one for the interaction was Mentimeter. Okay. Great. When you try to download the book, if it tells you that the code is invalid, then it is probably because you've added a space either before or after it when you've copied and pasted the link. I've just added the link to the presentation again, so if anyone wants to catch up on any information on the book or anything like that, that's good. Great. So thanks a lot. Now we'd like to conclude our session. It was really wonderful session. I thank you on behalf of the whole Mind Matters team for your time, for your valuable input, your knowledge. Sir Nicholas. My pleasure. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you. And, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.